Now, I'd like to introduce someone who's already familiar to many people in the room, the president of the University of Montana. President George Dennison has now been 20 years at his job. Did I get that correct?
19.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm adding years to your life, sorry. George Dennison is already the longest serving president in the history of the University of Montana, having served in that capacity for 19 years and showing no sign of quitting. In his tenure as president of the university, we've seen extraordinary changes on campus. Anyone who's walked across campus today knows it's still a massive building site, which is impressive. And most of the buildings, indeed all of the buildings built over the last 2 decades have been built primarily with private support. So it's truly an amazing visionary task that our president's been engaged in over the last 20 years. And part of his vision encompasses the importance of community engagement and service learning. And rather than me say more about that, I would like to introduce President Dennison and thank him for all of his years of strenuous and sustained support for community engagement. Thank you, George.
Well, thank you very much, Jim, and I want to express my appreciation to all of you, students and faculty, staff who are in the room, for your willingness to become engaged in this activity. It's been a while coming to have a group this size celebrating service learning, but it's wonderful to have it. So I do appreciate your effort and your being here. I have the honor and privilege today to introduce our keynote speaker for this very special and timely colloquium focused on service learning. As you all know, I think you know, if you don't, it's wonderful to say it, the University of Montana recently received designation by the Carnegie Foundation for the Advancement of Teaching for the prestigious 2008 Community Engagement Classification in recognition of our commitment to outreach and civic engagement, those two. That's one of about 38 or 39 research universities across the country who have attained that designation. So I think it's a remarkable achievement. And I want to express my appreciation to all of you for that. There is no doubt about where it comes from. It reflects the willingness to become engaged on the part of the students and the faculty. And that's what truly makes it meaningful. Any one of these classifications have some meaning of their own, but they have even more meaning when they reflect the attitudes, concerns, and interests and engagements of the students and the faculty. Our speaker today knows well the significance of such a designation for an institution of higher education. And it's a pleasure for me to be able to introduce him, and I look forward to his remarks. Dr. Andrew Furco currently serves as Associate Vice President for Public Engagement of the University of Minnesota. Also holding, people like this have to be multitaskers and multi-talented, also holding the positions as Associate Professor in the College of Education and Human Development and Director of the university's International Center for Research on Community Engagement. His research focuses on experiential learning, civic engagement, and service learning in educational systems in the U.S. and abroad. In that regard, I think a little bit about our experience here and the experience across Montana in becoming involved in service learning and in community service particularly. We started, I think, in the state thinking that service was really the aim, the objective, because of the value of the service to those who received it and the value to the person who is providing it. But over time, it became very clear, or soon became clear, I should say, that service was a means to an end more than personal in nature. It was a means to civic engagement, that we could, by those efforts, involve young people as well as our faculty in that service which would lead to the revitalization or development of the ethic of civic engagement, which is really what it's all about. Clearly, our speaker comes well qualified to the charge he has today to speak about these issues. In addition to that, he's published extensively, a great deal of scholarly work focused on service learning including some titles here: Service Learning, the Essence of the Pedagogy, a topic that should be of interest to the faculty here today, published in 2001, and then Service Learning Through a Multidisciplinary Lens, published in 2002, both co-edited with Shelley Billig, and more than 30 journal articles and book chapters exploring the practice and study of community service. His current research, focused or funded by the U.S. Department of Education, involves a 3-year investigation of the development of values among 7,500 elementary school students participating in a service learning character education program based in the language arts. A very interesting, and I think our hope he will say a few words about that. He has presented for and led workshops during national service learning conferences around the world and participates actively in several national and local service learning and community engagement associations. I'll mention a few here: the U.S. National Review Board for the Scholarship of Engagement, the International Association for Research on Service Learning and Community Engagement, the International Values Education Research Consortium, and the International Center for Service Learning in Teacher Education. All, again, very vital and important areas of study. His considerable list of achievements includes the 2003 Award for Outstanding Contributions to Service Learning Research, given by the International Conference on Service Learning and Community Engagement Research, and the 2006 Researcher of the Year Award presented by the National Society for Experiential Education. Based on this record and what we can discern from it, you will have little difficulty in understanding why I believe the program organizers have made an excellent choice of a keynote speaker. Please, if you will, join me in welcoming to Missoula, the University of Montana campus, and the podium, Dr. Andrew Furcall.
Oh, wow. President Dennison, thank you very much for that very gracious and kind introduction. I greatly appreciate it. And it is a great, great pleasure to be here with you today in beautiful Montana. I know what I've been missing all this time. Andrea and Dean have been saying, you have to come to Montana, you have to come to Montana. There's just a few states that have not visited, Montana being one of them, and it is really wonderful to be here. Thank you, and thank you for the nice weather, too. And thank you for allowing me to be part of this service learning colloquium. I greatly appreciate this event, and congratulations on having a wonderful turnout and a wonderful set of discussions. I want to thank Andrea, Vernon, and Dean McGovern for their invitation, and Dean McCusick as well for McCusick for your hospitality. Thank you very much, and I've enjoyed meeting a number of you this morning. I look forward to meeting many more of you this afternoon. I know that this is lunchtime and your meals are coming, so please feel free to continue enjoying your meals, and I'll do my best to try to keep you listening and engaged as much as I can in the short time we have together. Today's focus is on service learning in this colloquium, and I'd like to challenge us a bit to think about some reasons why we do service learning. Why service learning? Why should we engage our students in service? And I mean our students in service. And what is happening in higher education regarding our work with community? I realize that some of you also are working in K-12 initiatives, and I think some of the things that I'll be talking about today, although it focuses on higher education, will be relevant, hopefully, to your work as well. Also, in the presentation, you have on your table copies of the presentation slides. I won't be spending a lot of time on each one of them, but I did want to give you some information that hopefully you can take with you and use as some resources. And I did add a few extra slides based on the conversations of this morning about helping us to define service learning a little better. Over the last few years, we have seen a tremendous growth in the engagement of institutions of education, both K-12 and higher education, with the community. And this, although our engagement has been going on for many years, for a long time, through internships and field studies and community service and volunteer initiatives, clinical practica, service learning, and community-based research, a lot of this work has been marginalized, or hasn't, although it's been sustained, it hasn't really been institutionalized. And so I think that some of the things that we're seeing now is trying to find a way to make this a more important part of the fabric of our educational system, to make this part and parcel of what we do as institutions of education. And I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about that. And I think there are lots of reasons why this is happening. I'm going to need a little help with our PowerPoint here because I don't have oh, I do have a clicker. Oh, okay. Well, this is terrific. Ah, excellent. Thank you. Thank you.
All the latest technology.
Fantastic. Please do enjoy your meals. Go right ahead as they come. I know you're all hungry. So we are seeing this growth of community engagement around a variety of different institutions, and we're looking at this work from different kinds of focuses, from volunteer programs to civic engagement, to service learning, to leadership and community engagement. Oops, too far. And colleges and universities around the country are building these centers, these initiatives, these university-wide programs to try to advance community engagement. And so we're seeing this being a movement in higher education, I would say in K-12 education as well. And there are lots of reasons for this. One reason is that we're seeing National Commission reports that came out in the 1990s talking about the renewal of American society and the sustaining of democracy. And what was missing from those reports was higher education. Higher education was just not included in those discussions in those 1990 Commission reports. And higher education started to say, hey, what about us? We're over here. Hello, we have something to contribute. And what we heard was, well, higher education, you're ivory towers, you're elitist, you're sort of off doing your esoteric, abstract stuff. We're talking about real life, real things. And we started to wonder why we're not engaged and how we can engage in these community discussions. And so that began this movement about thinking about our relationship with the community as institution of higher education. Accreditation has come to bear. North Central accrediting boards that accredit colleges and universities, WASC, the Western Association of Schools and Colleges, are now looking and asking for evidence that the institution is fulfilling its civic purposes. This has put pressure on institutions of higher education to do more community engagement. National Science Foundation, National Institutes of Health, for research universities especially, they are now looking for research that's interdisciplinary, meaning not just within a discipline, but also transverses different disciplines, and also has broader impacts on the community. And so that's what it means to do significant research of significance, is having research that has broader impacts. So that's been putting pressure on institutions to also connect with communities. You cannot get an NIH grant or NSF grant in some of the sections of those grants without partnering with community. Undergraduate reform about good teaching and good learning and interdisciplinary studies. Those kinds of initiatives have really pressured us and forced us to take a good look at how we can better engage students with the real world. Disciplinary reforms within specific disciplines. We're starting to see the emerging fields of public scholarship and the kinds of scholarship that are connected with the community through engaged scholarship, and the renewal of purposes of higher education, the civic purposes. Now, the civic purposes are not new. This is not new things that we do. In fact, if we look at our mission statements, this place called Harvard University. Have you ever heard of this place? Anyway, Harvard University in its student handbook promises the following. It promises that it expects the scholarship collegiality it fosters in its students will lead them in their later lives to advance knowledge, to promote understanding, and to serve society. These are civic purposes. We see this at places like my former institution, Berkeley, where we talk about the responsibility of enlarging, understanding, promoting justice, reducing suffering, enriching the human experience. Again, civic purposes. In the founding documents of Stanford University in 1891, we had civic purposes as part of what the institution was established to be. We also see this at community colleges, to serving society. And here's a wonderful institution that you may know. This is what you purport to do and to be. As you can see, cultural outreach, service benefiting local, regional, state, national, and the nation, civic purposes. So I ask you, where does this happen, and how does it happen? Does it happen automatically, or do we have to make it more intentional? And this is what the community engagement movement today is all about. It's about making this work very intentional and very much part of what we are as institutions of education, of higher education. Now, people say, well, we do this work. We have our tripartite mission of research, teaching, and public service. And what we're saying now that the work today around community engagement is not just about doing this work through public service. When we think about community engagement, we tend to relegate it to that part of our mission, to that public service part. And what we're saying is that's not accurate given our mission. We are really looking at the Engage campus where we have our three-part mission of research, teaching, and service. A couple of things here. These are all the same size. The circles are all the same size. That is not quite accurate on most of our, not quite the way it is on most of our institutions. Some of these circles are larger than others. There are also overlaps, which is also not usual on many of our campuses. And what we're saying is that to be an engaged institution, we want to maximize and optimize opportunities to engage with the community, with society, local, nationally, and globally, across all dimensions of our mission, of our tripartite mission. So to connect through research, maybe with community-based research initiatives, through, through teaching, like internships and community-based teaching initiatives, through research, also through service, and all of these overlaps. And there's this one overlap here, E, that you see, which integrates teaching with service done in the community. And this is what we call service learning. And service learning is a very, very important part of what we do around building the engaged campus, because it ties community engagement into a core fundamental function of the academy, and that is teaching. Regardless of the kind of institution we are, regardless of how big or small our circles are, teaching is fundamental to all institutions of education. And what service learning allows us to do is to take that service mission and that teaching mission and tie them together, integrate them in ways that we connect with the community in collaborative ways. But we also connect with the community through research in other ways as well to build the Engaged University. And like at the University of Minnesota, for example, we have a number of community-based research initiatives about building engaged scholars and having faculty think about community engagement as part of their scholarly agendas. So this is what we're trying to aim at. So one is that community engagement is important because, one, it helps fulfill our mission as institutions of education as we purport it to be, as we purport the mission to be. Another reason we do this work is because it's good teaching. We connect, engage our students with the community because it's about good teaching. So what are the elements of good teaching? Well, you know them, and we know it from lots of research. We know that good teaching is contextualized, it's actively engaging students in the learning process, it's student-centered, it's learning-centered, it's socially constructed. It's about getting students to construct their knowledge, to problem solve, high-order thinking, to be able to engage in activities that help them advance their knowledge and understanding. This kind of presentation is not necessarily the best form of teaching. Okay? I'll remember about 90% of this presentation, and if you remember 10% of this presentation, that means I did a pretty good job. All right? So what we're saying is engaging students with the real world and contextualize authentic experiences is actually good teaching, and this is another reason to do it. And one of the things I think makes service learning of all the different kinds of active learning pedagogies important is because it's authentic. It's about real people and doing work for real people. It's not just about doing assignments for the classroom. I'll tell you a quick story. I'm going to be quick because I'm running out of time, as I always do. I was interviewing, this is for our K-12 educators. I was interviewing K-12 teachers in California about why they do service learning and what is it about service learning that they find valuable. And one teacher thought about it, and she said to me, well, my waste paper baskets are empty. This was an elementary school teacher. And I said, so your students clean up your classroom? And she said, no. She goes, before I did service learning, at the end of the day, my waste paper baskets would be full. She said, and I'd look through them, and it would be my students' work. She goes, I'd spend so much time giving my students feedback and helping them through their assignments, and these students would spend time on this work, and then they would just throw it out. She goes, now my waste paper baskets are full. Students are starting to see their work as valuable. They start to say, look at what I did. This is work that I did for an authentic audience. So they take more stock and more value. And I thought that was a very powerful statement about the kind of pedagogy this is. So it's authentic, it's active, it's constructivist. Students are problem solving, coming up with the solutions. It's collaborative. Very important. Cooperative learning, very positive, very important. Personalized, it's individualized. It's not a one-size-fits-all model. But it's very personalized, tapping into people's individual passions. It's very empowering and certainly expands our boundaries. It gets us beyond our comfort zones, and this is a very important part of transformational learning. And I think service learning helps us do this. We go in communities that we're unfamiliar with. We're working on issues that are controversial and sensitive and sometimes tap our emotions in ways that make us feel uncomfortable. That's the kind of learning we're looking at, and it's done with a rich academic base to it, because it's integrated with the curriculum. One of the things that's not in your packet here that I wanted to talk about is that we confuse community service and service learning a lot. And so here's a quick way to kind of distinguish service learning from volunteerism and community service. When we do community, if you think about these two continuum, one being focus on whether the activity is focusing on service or on learning. What is it focusing on? And the other continuum being is who is the primary intended beneficiary? Very important words. Is it the provider of that service or the recipient? When we do volunteer community service activities, the focus is on providing a service. Yes? Right? Do we learn from that experience? Absolutely. But the focus is on providing a service. Who is the primary intended beneficiary? The recipient of that service. We're doing it to benefit someone or something or an organization. Do I benefit from it as a provider? Absolutely, but that's not who the primary intended beneficiary is. We also have internships and field studies programs, clinical practica. The focus, we may do this for no money, no pay, no compensation. The focus is on learning about the profession, about clinical practice, whatever it might be. We're providing a service, but the focus is on learning. The primary intended beneficiary is the provider, the student of that work. Right? Do others benefit from it? Yes, but that's not who the primary beneficiary is. With service learning, the focus is intentionally on both providing a service and learning. Intentional learning. And on providing benefits to both the provider and the recipient intentionally. It starts out that way. So you can have 3 students working side by side in a hospital. One is doing an internship, one is doing a service learning, and one is doing community service, and it all has to do with the intentionality behind the activity. It's not the activity that defines what it is, it's the intentionality behind it. And this is a very important distinction. And when we review proposals for service learning, for example, people say we're doing service learning, and I say, that's more like an internship, or that's more community service. It's not that one's better than the other. It's just that these things are a bit different, and they get operationalized differently. The kind of relationship we have with the community is different, the expectations are different, the outcomes are different. Okay? And I'm sorry I didn't have this, but based on the discussion this morning, I added it, so I apologize. Another quick way to think about this is we have a lot of service learning. Some of it's not great, right? So how do you get to high-quality service learning? Well, you want high service and integrated learning. We can have a learning experience and a service experience, but they may not be integrated. That's service learning, but it's not a high-quality service learning, or not as high quality as it can be. So this is a little quadrant, a little matrix. You want to get to that quadrant on the upper right there. Okay? Quality service and integrated learning. Okay. Sorry, I don't have enough time to do this. Normally what I would do is actually go through some examples and see which quadrant you think it would fit in. But I always say what we want to do with service learning is think of it this way. You have a red sphere that is a vibrant community service experience that does a lot of good work in the community. And you have a blue sphere, which is a rich academic course or activity. Service learning is not the red sphere and the blue sphere touching each other, which we often see. Activities in the classroom, activities in the communities, and they're connected. What we want is a purple sphere, that what happens in the classroom, in the learning component, helps us do a better job in the community. And that experience in the community enhances our understanding of what we're learning in the classroom. The two are inextricably linked, and there's value added in putting them together. Okay, that's what we're looking for with service learning. Okay. Thank you for indulging me on adding those 2 slides there. So it's good teaching. Another reason we do this work, I think, is we need to prepare our students for the global workforce, right? So you know all this, right? You know what employers want. They want people who can problem solve, take initiative, work in groups, have multiple perspectives, understand the global society. All these things are necessary to be successful in our global environment. And service learning can help us get there. Service learning is not the only thing that can help us get there. It's one way. And I think that makes a good case for helping our students be more prepared for the global workforce. All right. Another reason, I think, is because it helps us to think about how we utilize our intellectual capital to address social issues. We're in a very tough time right now. And when we think about the role of higher education, where investments are going to be made, you know, as an associate vice president, I get told, well, universities, you have a lot of money, you have endowments, you know, you have all these assets, right? So why should we invest in this work? And part of the challenge for us is to say, well, the value of the work that we're doing, whether it's research and teaching, has to have benefits to society. 1, because that's what we say we do. And 2, because we need it. We need it. Okay? When I was at the University of California, Berkeley, we had internationally renowned experts on homelessness at our institution. I don't know if you know the Berkeley campus. It's a very urban campus. The Bancroft Street is on the south side. All you have to do is cross Bancroft Street and you see homeless people. What's wrong with this picture? Okay? Part of our responsibility is to think about, as institutions of education, higher education, think about the intellectual and human capital we have to address very complex, difficult issues. These are challenging issues. Poverty, the environment, health, these are difficult, difficult issues. If the so-called best and brightest aren't going to address these issues, then who will? Who's going to be able to come up with these solutions? If our community is not going to be engaged in helping us come up with some solutions and understanding the solutions, then we're going to be in a very difficult spot. So part of what we need to think about as institutions of education is what our role is in helping to address social issues. That's not to mean everything we do is about social problem solving. It means to, in the broader scheme of things, we need to address these very complex issues and think about how we connect it to our academic work. And I can give you a couple examples of this where in San Francisco, for example, in one of the areas there was a growing incidence of cancer in one of the areas, and there was a refinery nearby, and public health students went out and they started testing toxins in the air and toxins in the water and found that there were higher levels than was allowed, and got the refinery to reduce its emissions and did a lot of work, sort of Aaron Brockovich kind of thing, right? But these were students who came up with the solutions, who collected the data, and it was very scientifically done because it was data that was collected systematically, done with the appropriate measures, with the right expertise, and it forced some change, okay? And I can give you lots and lots of examples of that. So part of it is how do we take the expertise we have and help make a difference in the community. Now this work is not easy to do. It is very, very difficult and complex, and I want to give you a sense of some of the complexity. We do this work for lots of different reasons, and we all have preferences around this work. My colleague Barbara Maley and I completed a study, and Julia Reed completed a study looking at student preferences for their service-oriented experiences and then mapped to see what their actual experiences were in the community and to see if the experiences matched what their preferences were. And then we looked at a series of a set of outcomes, connections with academics, learning about the community, a host of things. And we found that the students who had a better match between their preference and the actual experience did statistically significantly better on those dimensions that we looked at. So this has implications for practice. We don't just send students out and do service. We have to think about what students are interested in, find an opportunity in the community that matches that preference, and then we're more likely to get the kinds of outcomes that we hope. We look at students, we do this work perhaps for charity purposes, and I gave you an example of homelessness that might look, how it might look across these different kinds of preferences. So a charity thing might be serving soup at a kitchen. Perfect, wonderfully excellent kind of activity service that we might do. Another might be empowerment service, where we actually help the homeless understand what social services are available so that they can then empower themselves to take control of their situation, sort of, you know, giving a fish versus teaching someone to fish, right? Public work. We saw a lot of this right after Katrina. Work needs to be done. It needs to be done now. No one's doing this work. We need to mobilize people and get people to do this work. It's very contained, confined, and it's the kind of work that needs to be done. And for example, it might be facilitating a homeless shelter. We need a homeless shelter. We need it now. Let's do it. Okay. Another kind of work, service work, is participatory democracy, which is about getting people to become more in tune with political affairs, getting to change laws, getting them to vote, all those kinds of activities that help sustain the democracy. And you see a lot of the democratic society, democratic practices issues, small d, democratic practices issues around this work. And social action might be taking a stand on something like doing a protest or doing a camp out. Social change is where you actually want to see change. So if I'm going to go do the service, I want to see some change. I want to see the conditions change for the community I'm serving. Or social justice, which is wrong. There have been wrongs and I want some rights. Some injustices have been here and I want to correct those injustices. These are different kinds of motivations. And we have to think about these preferences that we have and try to match these as much as possible so that students have a good experience and they're able to do the kind of experience that we call a meaningful service experience, which is one of the key criteria for good service learning. Okay? I'm sorry I don't have more time to go through all this, but I want to kind of make sure I share that with you. I just want to share a couple more thoughts with you. The service learning literature is replete with impacts on students. People say to me, well, does this work? Does this work for students? The answer is yes, it depends. And we have a lot of outcomes that we've looked at. Service learning, if you want to study on students' outcomes, academic outcomes, I have research for you. If you want on personal outcomes, I've got research for you. If you want on career outcomes, I've got research studies for you. So we have studies on all of these things, right? And the problem is these studies are about specific kinds of students and specific kinds of service learning courses or class experiences or doing specific kinds of service activities in different kinds of communities, right? So we can't generalize a lot of these findings beyond the studies. But service learning does a lot of things. The things we get challenged on by professors and by K-12 teachers is, well, what's the academic impact, right? Show me the evidence about the academic impact. I was asked to show how service learning helps raise students' standardized test scores. This is in K-12. And I said, forget it. I said, if service learning did that, we'd all be doing service learning, right? So the academic outcomes are very, very amorphous and difficult. And in fact, when we look at the literature, the research, most of it in the academic realm is mixed. And where we do see positive impacts, we see very small effect sizes, meaning we see some difference with students who do service learning and students who do not academically, but it's not that great of a difference, right? So people say, oh, no, so then we shouldn't do this. Well, I say this. This is what we try to do. We try to show community engagement and academic outcomes. We know that when we have clearly defined programmatic features, meaning high-quality practice, because not all service learning is great, right? When we have high-quality practice, we tend to see these outcomes. High self-esteem, a lot of the personal, social kinds of things, motivation, empowerment, pro-social behaviors, and it's academic motivation and motivation, civic motivation, and academic and civic engagement, pro-social behaviors. Okay. This is where we see the most robust findings across different kinds of service learning experiences, across different kinds of, different levels of students from K through graduate, different kinds of communities. And guess what? These are, we know, mediating factors for students' academic success. Students who are more empowered do better academically. Students who are more self-efficacious do better academically. Students who are more motivated do better academically. Students who are more engaged do better academically. So what service learning, at least from what we think, in terms of what we know from the research, we think does, is help put students in a better position, help create the conditions for students to do better academically, to engage them and to motivate them in ways that will allow them, hopefully, to have a better academic experience. Okay? I just have a couple more things to say, and then I'll open up to some questions. We also see some faculty outcomes, and you have the list there. This is some things faculty report, greater satisfaction with teaching, and also collaboration with others and getting understanding of the community. We also have to consider our partners, and here are some tips about working with partnerships. It's all about, earlier we talked about reciprocity, very, very important. It's about building trust, and it's about seeing our community partners as co-educators and co-partners in this work, that there are assets, there's asset and expertise among our community partners, that they have a lot to offer. They sometimes know a lot more about the issues than we do in the academy, and we have to honor that and respect that and include them in the development of the work that we do. And the last thing are just some tips about how to institutionalize this work. And I'm sorry I don't have enough time to go through them, but they're there for you to look at. I just want to say that the studies on institutionalization of service learning basically tells us it takes We have 3 levels of institutionalization: critical mass building. This is, we want more courses, more faculty, more partnerships, more students involved. Then once we get to the next stage, it's quality building. And that's, wow, we've got a lot of stuff, but it's not all high quality. We start to see the development of standards and criteria, your course review kinds of process, right? You have a course review process that I think is very well done to really monitor the quality. And then the final stage is sustained institutionalization, where we start to see positions and secured funding and those kinds of things that really help sustain it. It takes 5 to 7 years to move from one stage to the next, the research suggests. So we're looking at a long-term view, a long-term vision for this work. And that's the thing we have to think about as we begin to engage with our communities in ways that we're not going to say in 2 years, thanks, that was great, really enjoyed work with you, bye, right? Which we sometimes do when we have a 2-year grant or a 3-year grant, a research grant. We're going to partner and our grant's over, and it's like, okay, we don't work with you anymore, or we can't work with you anymore. So we have to think long-term and systemic. And this is what's going to help us get community engagement, especially service learning, into the fabric of what the institution is about and help us fulfill the mission that we say and we purport to fulfill. So with that, I'd like to open up to some questions. And I hope you were able to eat, too. Questions? Yes, sir, you had a question.
I'll preface it by saying I'm a real believer in service learning. I think it does wonderful things. But when you had the one on the academic outcomes, I sometimes wonder if it's a kind of a both and or back and forth relationship, because what I find is that oftentimes the students who are already the strongest students academically are the ones who engage in student learning. And so, I think it's going both ways on that. I've already got really strong students, and they're the ones who are already feeling empowered,
right,
engage in those kinds of things, and they engage in student learning, and it really adds those further on.
Yeah, it's sort of what comes first. Are the students who are doing service learning the ones who are more engaged and normally would do it? Let me repeat the question. The question was, because of the microphone, that is it because we have, the question is, the academic outcomes manifested because we have students who are already highly motivated and highly engaged are the ones that select to do service learning, and therefore they're the higher achievers, for example. And that's a very good question to ask. I would say this: when we look at our K-12 schools, for example, 1 out of every 3 high school students drops out in the U.S. In inner cities, it's 1 out of every 2. Okay, in the United States of America. Why did they drop out? It's not because of in with the wrong crowd, bad parenting, drugs. Number 1 reason: bored and disengaged with school and find school irrelevant to their real lives. Okay? It's a disengagement with the curriculum. So engaging students in service learning, and we're seeing this in some of the K-12 literature, actually helps students become more engaged in learning. Sort of what that teacher was saying. Students start to see the relevance of what they're learning. Why do we have to learn algebra? Now they're starting to see the reason why, right? Let me give you an example, a story of 5th graders studying slavery. You may have seen a program on this. 5th graders studying slavery. And they go through the units in the American history textbook, and they were studying history on slavery. And they read the chapter, do the questions at the end, then they move on. And when the kids asked, does slavery still exist? And teacher said, well, let's find out. And they did all these research on the internet and everything. They came across to Sudan. They learned about the warlords in Sudan and how any kind of infraction against the warlords, you have to pay compensation. And so people don't have money. So if you don't have money, they could take your son or daughter as a slave as compensation for your infraction. So these kids became very intrigued by this, these fifth graders became very intrigued by this, and they started to say, well, can they ever get their kids back? And they found out that, yes, they could, but they'd have to buy them back. Well, how much would it cost? They found out it was about $100, whatever the amount, I think it was like $100. So these kids went and raised $10,000 and worked with this international organization, bought back these kids for their parents, exchange pictures, the whole thing. So it's when we empower young people to take control and take leadership and to really make these messy issues learning experiences, educational experiences, because that's what real life is about. It's about being able to be resourceful. So those students who are higher achievers, they're going to do fine. They're going to do fine. And one thing we do in higher education is we do cream. You know, we get applicants, we get the best ones, right? And we want to, of course, elevate them to higher learning and to better education. But what about everyone else? So I think service learning, the reason I like service learning is I think it's a very universal approach. A lot of programs we have in education focus on specific kinds of individuals, specific communities. You know, I think service learning is very universal. It's at all levels of education, it's different kinds of communities, different interest areas, it's very individualized, personalized, and I think it can really tap students and individuals wherever they may be. And certainly not perfect by any means, but I think there's a lot of potential there. So thank you for the question. Yes?
I'm wondering if you could speak to the issue of institutionalizing this. So the strategies, I know that you said it would take several years. I mean, here we are, faculty at the university, some of us, or different universities, worried about getting promoted, worried about tenure, worried about getting promoted after that. And one of the messages I think I get is that this is going to take a lot of work to build these relationships and to organize groups of students to different places and maintain those contacts. So how can we, what are strategies to use to get it incorporated and valued in our unit standards on the department level, by the deans, at the college level, by the provost or whatever, at the president, at the university level?
So the question is, how do we get this work institutionalized given the pressures that faculty have in terms of the scholarly work and all the work that needs to be done, and the fact that this does take a very long time? How do we embed this in a way that is ultimately going to be institutionalized? And I say, I'm going to be institutionalized by the time this is over, given all the years I've been spending on trying to do this work. But I think that I would say that it has to be part of an overarching framework about building an engaged university, an engaged campus. Those logos I put up earlier is all about a movement towards saying, what are we as an institution of education? What is our purpose? And part of it is to be able to say that this work, community engaged work and socially relevant work, is valued. And it's valued not just for the service piece, but also for the scholarly piece. That new discoveries and new advances in teaching are all important part of the community engaged component. So we need structures, we need policies. At the University of Minnesota, we changed our tenure and promotion policy to say you have to produce discoveries of significance to the discipline and to society. So somewhere in our portfolios, we have to talk about how our work is significant to society. It doesn't mean that every project I do is a community-engaged project. It means that somewhere I have to make this more explicit. And this is where I said earlier, does this happen automatically, or do we have to make it more intentional? And I think part of it is doing this more intentionally. And when I arrived at the University of Minnesota last year, I mean, one of the things that was a very pleasant surprise is there's lots of this work going on. It's just under the radar. And one of my jobs is to really bring it to the surface and spotlight it a bit more and bring visibility. And it's incredible scholarly work. It's wonderful, wonderful work. Great discoveries that are being made, and they're being published in the peer-reviewed journals. But people don't really talk about it. And I think the more that we can make this work visible, people will begin to see how it connects. But we have to work at all levels. The philosophy and mission, we have to look at faculty support. We have to look at the student experiences and articulating those experiences. We're looking at having our students perhaps come in with, I'm proposing this social platform that students adopt when they come to the university, and they build expertise on that, tying it to their academic work, professional aspirations, et cetera. So that it's articulated. It's not a course here and experience there, but really vertically and horizontally aligned. And also the community partnership piece being very, very important. And being a research university, a large comprehensive research university, we want international recognition, not just local recognition. So how do we partner globally? So it has to work at all these levels, and there has to be a lot of policies that help support that. And it does take a very long time, and leadership is very important, and you're very fortunate to have a wonderful President Dennison who supports this work. But the disciplinary associations are changing as well, and they're starting to look at the engineering, for example, and some of these other disciplines begin to have this whole public scholarship dialogue. And after this session, I'm doing a session on engaged scholarship, if any of you are interested in some of the experiences that how we define engaged scholarship, if you're interested in that. But it is a a commitment on the part of the institution to say, yes, we want to do this work. We're just about at 1:30. Do one more question. Yes, in the back.
One of the things we're trying to accomplish on campus is increase retention. And when you look at the slide that you have on community student outcomes, engaged students tend to stick around longer. And yet it seems like most of the courses that we have for service learning tend to be our upper division classes. But our biggest retention loss is at the freshman to sophomore level. It would seem like this might be a great place to institutionalize it. When students first come in, to get them engaged in the community through service learning or through other civic engagements, start to make that a priority towards retention, but also improve academics.
So the question was, the comment was about retention and service learning, the connection between service learning and retention, and perhaps engaging students early in the process in service learning as a way to help them connect with the community, connect perhaps with other students, and encourage retention. And there are a couple of studies that have looked at the relationship between service learning and retention. Barbara Maley's study is one, Richard Muthiah's study, and Bob Ringle's study is another, that have shown a strong relationship between service learning and relationship, and we definitely need more research in this area. But there is that students report feeling more connected to their community, more connected to the institution, more connected with their peers and with their faculty members, which we know are very important parts of the retention puzzle. So thank you for that comment. I'm sorry we're out of time, but I do thank you for your attention, and thank you again for allowing me to be part of your symposium today. Thanks.